early 1970s, Sri Lankan British astrobiologist, astrophysicist, and mathematician Chandra Wickramasinghe and eminent astronomer Fred Hoyle pioneered a theory called cometic panspermia that said life was seeded on Earth via comets and asteroids. Even though the idea of panspermia has been viewed with skepticism by many in the scientific community, evidence has steadily piled up over the last 5 decades, vindicating it. The latest is NASA's finding that samples from the asteroid Bennu contain 14 of the 20 amino acids found in proteins in organisms on Earth, including all five building blocks which constitute RNA and DNA. MCR spoke to Professor Wickramasinghe to find out how he views NASA's Bennu findings. Welcome to Mindshare Reports, Dr. Wickramasinghe. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you interview me because you have such a deep interest in what I'm going to tell you. So I think I'm equally privileged to be talking to you.
How do you view NASA's finding that the asteroid Bennu contains the bioessential sugars, ribose and glucose, from the standpoint of your own cometic panspermia theory that you pied along with Sir Fred Hoyle in the 1970s?
Yeah, exactly so, Mayank. And the bottom line is that we have, as scientists, no evidence whatsoever for what a process called abiogenesis, right? This is what they are trying to argue on the basis of everything they find in meteorites and in interstellar space from time to time. They regard it as being proof, indication of abiogenesis, except for the fact that every single experiment that has been done to demonstrate the possibility of abiogenesis in the laboratory has been a dismal failure for something like 50 years. The most powerful biochemical laboratories throughout the world, mostly in the United States. David Deamer is one of the leading guys in this kind of area of research. And every single experiment done so far has proved a negative result. So how they continue to talk about abiogenesis at every turn is, for me, somewhat almost hilarious. The bottom line is we have no evidence whatsoever for abiogenesis. We are seeing in various places, in comets and in the interstellar space, in distant galaxies and so on, biochemical substances, right? Maybe the evidence is still slender in deep space, but wasn't it about a year ago, a molecule called dimethyl sulfide, DMS, was discovered using the James Webb Telescope. It was discovered in what's called a exoplanetary system, hundreds of light years away from the Earth and from the solar system. And because this molecule, DMS, is only produced by life, as far as we know, the evidence is that there is life there. I think one has to infer on the basis of positive, known scientific evidence of life on Earth that here is a location distant, very far away from our solar system in which there is life. People are worried about that, and there have been attempts to say that maybe there are ways to find this, to form this molecule without life, without invoking life. But so it goes on. I mean, then they've recently found evidence for the same molecule, DMS, in a comet. And the comet has been studied a lot. This is a comet called the Rosetta mission studied this comet, right? And they found evidence of DMS in that. And then they have to say that the comet is a dead comet. Until then, all the evidence that we got together or put together from various sources, the Rosetta mission itself, the ground experiments that are landed on there, we found molecules that fit living particles, living microorganisms, right? So all that is now said to be in doubt because they should not have the preconception that people want to hang on to is that there cannot be life outside the Earth, and therefore these are just indications of pre-biology. Okay, and that's the sort of backdrop against which this new discovery in Bennu has to be looked at. Sure, they have found sort of evidence of biochemicals, sugars particularly, right, in the substance that was collected from Bennu. A sample of Bennu was brought to Earth and studied in various laboratories across the planet, and they're finding these very, very exciting molecules and sugars. So they say sugars, they have to be, that has to be an indication of pre-biology, not biology, but pre-biology, right? So I think this is a story that goes on in a very sort of subtly dishonest way, I think. Because in 1962, when I started my career as a research worker in Cambridge, working with the late Sir Fred Hoyle, cosmic dust, was supposed to be just simple particles of ice, water ice, right? Specks of ice. And it was my paper in 1960 that demolished that idea, or began to demolish the idea that cosmic dust was made of ice. And we wrote many papers in the early 60s to say that what we're seeing in deep space, in the dust clouds in space, was not ice grains, but carbon. And we thought, at the beginning, the carbon was in the form of sort of soot-like particles, like particles that come graphite, small graphite particles. But over the years, it turned out that this is not the best form of carbon that is there, and more than likely, it has to be some organic substance that we are seeing in the dust. But until the decade passed, that is in 1974, we did not know what that organic molecule was, and in 74 we published a paper saying polysaccharides in Nature, right, in the Nature, same journal that these guys are publishing now for Bennu. We said that the evidence points strongly to a biochemical substance, formaldehyde, chains of formaldehyde called polysaccharides, or some subset of the chains are the polysaccharides. So sugars in space became the norm for us to discuss from 1974 right through to the end of that decade. And towards the end of 1970s, we had suggested various experiments in the laboratory to show that the polysaccharides, or the sugar chains, were more likely to be biological than otherwise. And so that's the way it went. And every step in this process was taken cautiously. I maintain that quite firmly now, because people tend to think that these ideas are way out and they're not scientifically driven. In fact, the late Fred Hoyle was one of the most cautious scientists of that century. And he and I decided that this is something that we have to consider very seriously, that there is not just the organic molecules of life, that life itself in the form of microorganisms and bacteria, viruses, are everywhere in the cosmos, in the universe.
Correct.
So that's the background. So when they find sugar molecules in Bennu, I feel it is a little strange that they're not latching on to this little discovery and claiming a lot.
Is it your case that abiogenesis does not happen at all?
That would be my guess at the moment, Mayank, because I think that we have no evidence for it happening anywhere. And whenever we think there's a location in which it happens, it turns out to be a disappointment. So as
I
far
see.
as we know now, the most distant cosmic sources, even the galaxies at the edge of the universe, appear to have organic molecules that I can connect with biology. So where is this beginning? The beginning was perhaps never there, just as the beginning of the universe is also now in
Right.
serious question, isn't it? The Big Bang model of the universe told us quite decisively until about 2 or 3 years ago that the universe is just 13.7 billion years old, and it started it began as a Big Bang, and the universe kept expanding, and processes like the formation of elements, formation of stars, galaxies were a very slow process. But now we are finding galaxies that should never have been there at the
Right.
times. So I think the whole structure of our cosmology, which includes the astrobiology, is in a state of flux, and I don't believe that any of the standard theories would fit the data in the long term.
Right. Do you see the findings, the Bennu findings, as clearly vindicating your cometic panspermia theory?
I think the Bennu findings are certainly part of that process, that proof that is happening all the time. I think I've talked to you earlier that in 2001, I collaborated with the Indian Space Research Organization, and we sent balloons to the stratosphere, and we brought back microorganisms unquestionably out of the Earth, from outside the Earth. And we estimated also that hundreds of tons of microbes are falling on our planet every single day, right? We don't see them because they're very thinly distributed across the Earth's surface, so it's not something that you see every day. But if you collect a sample, as we did, then you can make that calculation and argue for this happening all the time. And it's also the case that other space organizations, notably the Chinese space station, had recently discovered microorganisms outside on their windows. This is at hundreds of kilometers above the surface of the Earth, right?
Right.
So, and also the International Space Station also had similar phenomena, microorganisms on the surface, and they're trying to argue that these are just brought up from the Earth by some mysterious process and so on. But it's all goes in the same direction, I think.
But then, are you saying that in order to see life on Earth, there doesn't have to be a specific cometic or asteroidal strike? It can just happen as a natural course of microbial movement.
Yeah, it doesn't have to. I mean, I think asteroids are not lumps of rock, pure lumps. They're the residues of comets that had a lot of rock in them, but comets with watery environments that were there for billions of years, right? And this is a bit of the asteroid Bennu is just a fragment of what is involved here, carrying the life that existed inside the comet, the microbial life that existed inside the comet.
But without these strikes that we are talking about, either cometic or asteroidal, do you think, are you saying that Earth by itself does not have terrestrially producible material for life? Does Earth have to necessarily depend on hits from outside?
I mean, the chemistry of the Earth's oceans could have produced organic molecules. That's not the point. To bring living molecules, arrangements of molecules that are life itself,
Right.
you can have loads of all the sugars you want, all the amino acids, and stir it in the ocean for an infinity of time, right? But nothing will happen. The probabilities that we discuss in all our books and papers over the years are just incredibly, improbabilities are incredibly huge. So if it happens once in the entire history of the galaxy, that would be a fluke itself. So
Right.
my guess is that it is a one-off process that is connected with perhaps the origins of the universe, if there was ever an origin of the universe, or it's just an eternal property of material that is in the cosmos.
Right. I don't know if you happen to see the video of the announcement by NASA, but the way that particular scientist was talking, it sounded so much like as if he was clearly advocating panspermia.
Well, I think it's, for me, I mean, when people heard the news in their newspapers and so on, they kept telephoning me, sending me emails, congratulating me that panspermia has been proved. So it's a panspermia of organic molecules, of biochemicals, right? But all of that has, if you put together everything that they collected in that in the Bennu sample and stir it for as long as you like, you wouldn't have life, right? It's
Right.
so it's the improbability of starting with these biochemicals and getting them in arrangements that would mimic life or reproduce a living system is incredibly small. And we've worked out probabilities that people have made fun of, like it's like we compared it to a tornado blowing through a junkyard, right? And
Right.
assembling a Boeing 747. It's a very famous or infamous statement
Yeah.
that we published in our books. I mean, that is the kind of improbability that is involved. Making organic molecules is not a big deal. Making the big building blocks of life is not a big deal. It can happen almost anywhere where the carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and a lot of water is present. All right, but it's taking those materials, simple atomic molecular materials, and ending up with the simplest,
Right.
self-replicating, evolvable biological system is just asking for the moon, basically,
I see.
metaphorically.
So that is where the fact that Earth has been so conducive to life by itself, that helped a great deal, right?
I think so. The Earth was started off as a assembly of just asteroids, large asteroids, mainly made of rock, striking, accreting, getting bigger and bigger, and forming eventually the Earth without the oceans, right? And then comets from the outermost regions of the solar system, which carried water and organics and whatever, kept hitting striking the Earth, and the oceans and the atmosphere were formed. And along with the oceans and the atmosphere, I reckon that we reckon in the panspermia theory that the seeds of life, which is in the form not of just organic molecules, not just sugar molecules, but reproducible living systems like simple bacteria, they came and started the whole process of life on the Earth.
Right. How do you read the fact that the Bennu sample contains 14 of the 20 amino acids which are found in the proteins in organisms on Earth, including all five building blocks which constitute RNA and DNA? What do you read in that?
Well, it tells me that that comet, not so long ago, had warm, watery interiors, and it was teeming with life, teeming with microorganisms. And so when the water dried out, or when it became a desiccated piece of asteroidal rock, the living systems would have essentially died out, but the materials from which they were made would have been there, and the components of those materials of living cells, bacteria, viruses, and so on, would be the sugars and the amino acids and sugars, whatever survived, has been recovered in the laboratory of these fragments that are now being talked about. So that doesn't surprise me, because I think every watery object with warm, watery, radioactively heated water interiors in the early solar system would have been teeming with life. The Earth was impossible to have life until the water came, and when oceans were deposited, then along with the icy comets and asteroids that fell, the earliest primitive living systems would have been dumped on the Earth.
Right. Uh, how do you, as the bearer of the panspermia theory now, after over 50 years, what do you think you can do to revive it in a manner that people again look at what you pioneered such a long time ago? I mean, I would think that, I mean, I'm perhaps an outsider, but it's perhaps Nobel Prize worthy.
Well, that's not one Nobel Prize, but I think it changes the entire course of the history of science, isn't it? To conclude and to argue first, and then to find evidence that tells you that life did not start yet on the Earth, and maybe did not even start in the entire galaxy. That's the way it's looking now. But it's such a frightening prospect for conventional scientists who's been brought up from the cradle to think that life has to emerge on the Earth, just as he or she was born onto this planet. So it's inferred that life also is part and parcel of the process of abiogenesis. This unproven process is a process of birth of life, or the inception of life everywhere. A totally unproven proposition, but it's comforting in the sense that it's a sort of cozy point of view, that nothing is alien, everything is sort of home brewed, and so on. So I think the realization that life is everywhere would transform the way we think about ourselves, the way that we think about our neighbors, the way we fight our wars. And so I think it is a very important transition in our thinking to achieve, which is not very slowly happening against all the odds, because people don't want to. The scientists who've been working on the conventional models of life do not want to be confronted with data that shows them that their entire lives' work has been essentially vitiated by the new discoveries. Yeah. So I think it's ultra-conservatism, it's protection of one's own careers and self-esteem. In the case of these individual scientists, that is, all these factors are serving to hinder a final acceptance of panspermia. But evidence is all over the place. That not one bit of evidence that I've seen in my 50 years of work that made me stop and think, oh, perhaps this is the wrong route to take. It wasn't
how do you explain the establishmentarian reluctance to the idea that life came from elsewhere?
I think it is ultra-conservatism, and it is also colored by some kind of Western national pride. The idea that that life is terrestrial sort of essentially agrees with the Judeo-Christian point of view that at a higher level, life started on the Earth.
I see. Just to conclude, this has nothing to do with our theme right now, but I'm very curious to know how you see all the frenzied speculations over the interstellar object Sri Atlas.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. I think I cannot rule it out entirely that this is an alien, an intelligent action on the part of some very advanced civilization that has not created, that had some involvement with the process of getting this huge comet together and throwing it out into space. For what end, I do not know if that happened, but I think the evidence is very, very flimsy at the moment, as far as I see it, to infer that this is any other than a comet from a distant, a normal comet, like the comets in our solar system, but coming from a distant exoplanetary system. I think that's where I would, on balance of all the evidence that I've looked at, that's what I think is most likely. But I mean, I cannot entirely discount the arguments that have been presented by the Japanese astronomer, isn't it, and also Avi Loeb in the United States. He's been maintaining that this is a artificial object, a spaceship or something. I find it difficult to believe, but it's
yeah, but Professor, I'm equally open to it, but my question is this. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that it is indeed a spaceship from a super advanced civilization, for the sake of argument. The findings suggest that it probably has been traveling for billions of years. It's between 7 and 10 billion years old, according to some findings. Now, which spaceship would last that long, and what kind of fuel would it be using? I mean, it's pretty clear that even if it's a spaceship, it will not have even remotely biological beings on it, which would last 7, 8, 10 billion years old. Where is the fuel coming from? So I'm curious, even if it's a spaceship, how do you explain all this?
Yeah, I mean, to travel from one solar system to another solar system, hundreds of millions of light years apart, you do not need any fuel at all, right? The gravitation. I mean, comets go around our solar system, go around the sun. They don't need any fuel, right? And if one of these our comets escape, then it'll just be driven by gravity from sort of passed on from one star to another, one star's gravity to the next star's gravity. So you wouldn't need, for the long haul trip, you would not need any energy except the forces of gravity, gravitational force. But what they're claiming now is that in the course of its recent motion through the solar system, it's exhibiting some deliberate swervings and changes in the orbit, right? Artificial shifts are claimed, but I think the evidence for that is very small. The evidence for a forward coma, the coma of comets are sort of a tail that goes against the direction of travel. And now they claim that there are some hints of forward tails that could have been used to deflect the comet to come into a closer orbit to I think Jupiter. They're thinking that So I don't know. I think these are all speculations that are being
but once again, if it's a spaceship of such advanced origin, why would it miss the only planet which has life on it by 170 million miles?
Yeah, it's bizarre. And then if it's been driven and controlled, if its motion is controlled by this advanced alien civilization, you've got to assume that the individuals, the organization lasts for, I don't know, millions of years. So we can't imagine even an entire human population having a coherent view of anything for more than 100 years, isn't it? I mean, right. Changing our views almost every term of presidential elections in the United States and every electoral cycle in the UK. So to have this happening, have a concerted, consistent plan to steer this object, to connect with an object that was propelled into orbit by distant relatives, the great grandparents or whatever, great to the end, many generations. I think it fails to convince me, but who knows?
Yeah, no, true. No, it is fascinating. I mean, it's great entertainment to think like that. But like I said, I find it very bizarre that something this super advanced, even if it was drifting, say, for 5 billion years, it
Yes.
would have basically just chanced upon our galaxy, and it would have chanced upon this area, and it may not even have recognized that there is a planet with life
Yes.
teeming.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the best I can think of.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think before it was set out, before this comet or spaceship was thrown into an orbit by a distant civilization, distant intelligent civilization, it would have had to know that in this last 300 years or so, a civilization would develop that would be able to appreciate what's happening, isn't it? A technology like what we have. So I think
I mean, if it is older than our solar system, why would it divine that 3 billion years from now there would be a solar system with a planet called Earth with intelligent life? I mean,
I think it's punk. I hate to say this, but I think it's margins on being insane. But there are
it's
some
worth keeping open. I agree. Yeah.
I think I would like to. I mean, this is called 3I because it's the third interstellar comet, right? Most
Right.
comets in our solar system are members of a huge family of local solar system comets surrounding all our planets at a distance of what, about 1/10 of a light year from our sun. Huge sort of swarm of comets, and these are deflected from time to time through normal gravitational forces, and they come across Jupiter. Jupiter deflects it still further, and some of them become so-called short period comets, right? Like Halley's.
Right.
But there are many comets that come in and out from our Oort cloud of local cloud of comets, and we don't think much about them because they are in orbits that we can connect to this local
Exactly.
system.
Yeah.
But if you have a comet like Atlas, comet like Boris, comet like Oumuamua, that is an intruder to our solar system, then the science fiction type mythology can be generated. But as far as I can see, other planetary systems must exist in very large numbers. And we know that from the Kepler satellite studies from 2009, we know that there are millions of planetary systems that must physically look like the solar system, right? So, and
Right.
they must have comets, that occasionally sort of evaporate from the local system and get into hyperbolic orbits and sometimes cross into our local
Right.
system, right? So that's what's happening. I think to find a stray comet, 3 comets in a decade coming into our solar system is not a big deal.
Right. Right. To wrap up, just as an aside, it's not a question, just an observation that Arthur C. Clarke, who lived in your native Sri Lanka all his life, wrote a fascinating book called Rendezvous with Ram, where he talks exactly about an object like this that is passing through.
Yeah, man, I've had so many discussions and chats with Arthur C. Clarke. I can almost
Oh, I
see him.
see.
Yeah, he was a very close and good friend of mine, and in his very last book, which he wrote, that's with the title "Carbon-Based Bipeds."
Right.
Greetings, carbon-based bipeds. He has a year-by-year prediction list of predictions. Right, in 2023, he says that AI will become more important and more decide our future more than human intelligence, right? So AI beats everybody else's intelligence in 2023. And when Halley's Comet returns, which is about 40 years from now or something like that, he says that Chandra and Fred's theory would be 100% vindicated, and all the scientists who are critical would have to hang their heads in shame.
I see. Oh, that's amazing.
Because he was absolutely convinced that we were on the right track. She chased me on every occasion when we went to Sri Lanka, and and he met up with me when he came back to Britain. So that was an interesting.
No, and maybe someday I would like to spend time with you talking about Arthur C. Clarke, since you knew him so well.
Yeah, I would love to. I think he was a great guy, and we don't really credit him with all the positive, good things that he did. In fact, you and I won't be talking now across thousands of miles, if not for his
concept.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, this is terrific, Professor. I want to once again thank you for your time. You're always generous with me. I greatly appreciate it. And
I love talking to you because you seem to have an open mind, and you
completely. I mean, we come from that part of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that goes a long way in my progress of my scientific ideas. I don't think that I respect the long established and long cherished views of a Western scientific establishment without thinking about it and coming to the conclusions that one has to come to independently of the mob. In fact, my guiding principle, I know that I told this before to you, is supposedly the last saying of the Buddha to his chief disciple, that look not to other people for exploring the world. Think of everything for yourself, or some words to the